Hi, this is Jim from Trek World, and today we are cracking open the warp core on one of the most influential, unofficial Star Trek texts ever published.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Remember that in all of these videos, there's going to be a link in the description that you can go to where you will actually be taken to an affiliate link on Amazon showing you the availability of the books that I've been discussing.
And exploring how it inspired a generation of fans to treat the Enterprise as more than a set. They treated it like a real ship. Okay, let's rewind our memories back to 1987, an interesting time in Star Trek history. Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home had just hit theaters the year before and was a surprising hit with mainstream audiences. At the same time, Star Trek: The Next Generation was gearing up to boldly go into primetime syndication. But here's the thing. Despite the resurgence of Star Trek on screen, fans were still living in a drought of hard details. Consider this. There was no memory alpha. There were no online chip schematics. There were official central lore databases. There was no Trek World. If you wanted to know how a warp core worked or why the bridge modules always looked like over-designed office chairs, you turned to fan-made blueprints, fanzines, and books like Mr. Scott's Guide to the Enterprise. This book dropped right down into the center of that moment. It wasn't just a manual. It was a cultural artifact from a time when fandom refused to wait for Canon and decided to build its own infrastructure in the meantime. Now, without getting into too many personal and private details about the author, I will point out that the author of the book is listed as Shane Johnson if you go to buy it today. Shane did transition very late into life before he passed, but at the time he wrote this book, he chose his public identity still to be Shane Johnson. So as a result of that, we're going to keep any references to Shane in this same 1987 frame of reference. Much of the book was speculative. Sure, it drew inspiration from production blueprints and behind-the-scenes interviews, but plenty of it was extrapolated based on logic and a whole lot of very fertile fan intuition. It offered explanation for things never seen or confirmed on screen. How did food replicators actually distribute meals? How did the Jeffrey tubes actually run throughout the secondary hull? What emergency procedures may have existed in the shuttle bay? For years, this was the guide that defined how fans understood things. And even now, bits of it still show up in fan builds, role-playing games, and model kits. It wasn't canon, but it was beloved. Mr. Scott's Guide didn't just provide technical details. It shaped the culture of Star Trek fandom. Starship fans, and you know who you are, treated this book like scripture. At conventions, it wasn't uncommon to hear fans debate page numbers for Mr. Scott's Guide the way other people might have debated the Prime Directive. Model builders used its deck plans for years. Science fiction writers borrowed terminology and system layouts wholesale, and Trek-themed role-playing games, here's UFASA, drew heavily from the book's interpretations, sometimes not even bothering to mention their source. It gave fans permission to believe the ship wasn't just a prop. It was a real place with functional working systems, and that made the universe feel bigger, more consistent, and more immersive. It was the 100% absolutely perfect spiritual successor to the 1970s version of the Starfleet Technical Manual.
If you have any videos, photos, or documents that you would like to donate to us, please feel free to send them to jim@trek-world.com or submit them via the web at submit.trek-world.com.
Here's where things get tricky. Despite being officially licensed by Pocket Books, Mr. Scott's Guide was never considered canon by Paramount. Indeed, its internal consistency often clashed with other Star Trek shows, especially Star Trek: The Next Generation, which introduced a very different design language and internal ship logic. It became part of a growing movement within Trek fandom that preferred fan-generated consistency over studio-generated canon. Fans were writing encyclopedias of headcanon, and Mr. Scott's Guide? Well, that was one of the earliest ones. In one of the ship's cutaway designs, there's just a hint. It's just a hint, a subtle visual implication that the Enterprise refit might be capable of separating its saucer section from the secondary hull. While this was never stated outright in the films or in the original TV series, the feature had been proposed very early on in the original series production, but was dropped due to budget limitations, and it had never been implemented whatsoever on screen until Star Trek The Next Generation did on the Galaxy class. Still, the idea that the saucer could separate caught fire with fans. They began debating whether it was secretly modular. Some argued that it made strategic sense. Others said it was a misreading of the illustration. The book itself? Vague. Don't go looking for answers in it, but the suggestion in the subtext is definitely there. That tiny seed of speculation grew into full-blown fan theories, fan fiction, and even YouTube videos today, decades later. That is the power of Star Trek's fan culture. Even a shadow of a possibility can become fertile grounds for fans' imaginations. Decades later, Mr. Scott's Guide is still discussed in fan forums, referenced in deep dive YouTube essays, as I said, and cited in debates about ship layouts and design legacy. You'll still see fans compare modern Starfleet engineering choices to ideas that were first raised in this guide. And in Star Trek fandom, that's often far more useful. If you're building a personal Star Trek archive, or you're just curating a shelf of lore-heavy collectibles, this book is a no-brainer. It captures the engineering heart of the franchise at a moment before the tech became slick and touchscreen-based. When buttons still clicked, when Jeffries tubes still felt like claustrophobic death traps, when warp drives needed a miracle worker. It also represents the golden age of fandom-led world building, a time when Star Trek fans weren't just consuming the universe, they were building it from the inside out. This guide just didn't explain the ship. It helped expand the myth. As such, Mr. Scott's Guide to the Enterprise is more than a book. It's a love letter to the idea that fictional worlds can have real structure, and that exploring them can feel like detective work, or archaeology, or maybe even spiritual practice all at once. It sits in the fascinating space between canon and speculation, between storytelling and blueprint. And like the best Star Trek stories, it asks one big question. What if this were real? And where is Rod Serling when you need him now? If that question excites you, if you've ever paused an episode to sketch out a deck plan, or wondered as a child why Turbolift went sideways, this book is your kind of Starfleet manual. And I just wanted to thank you so much for visiting my channel to watch one of my videos. I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you do enjoy this video, I would personally be very grateful if you might please consider subscribing to the channel. Why, you might ask? Well, viewer subscriptions help to ensure that I am able to continue providing more Trek World content like the video you just watched.